Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this third in the series of Dementia SA webinars with Danuta Lipinska. Danuta, a huge thank you from all of us at Dementia SA for giving of your time and energy to be with us today. Danuta is an independent trainer, consultant, supervisor, and counselor, and action learning facilitator. She has built a wealth of experience in supporting people with dementia, their families, and professionals who support them. Currently, Danuta is a senior facilitator at My Home Life, an evidence-based leadership support program for care home managers based at City, University of London. Danuta has now worked with over 400 managers throughout the UK and has experienced firsthand the inspirational work and exciting changes managers bring to their complex roles as a result of the leadership program. Danuta continues to develop bespoke counselling services for people living with dementia. She has developed dementia-specific counselling training for qualified therapists and recently was part of an innovative counselling service at Suffolk Mind. Danuta, a huge thank you from myself and from Karen Barakovitz, the Executive Director at Dementia SA. Karen is away on leave at the moment and wasn't able to join us, but she said to please mention so much gratitude and love that she has for you and admiration. I'm going to hand over to you, Danuta. Thank you so much again for your time and energy.
Thank you so much, Abigail. It's a pleasure and a delight to be here with all of you in warm and sunny South Africa, where it's chilly and rainy here in Norfolk in England. So we're talking about, sexually speaking, person-centered conversations about dementia, love, sex, intimacy, and well-being. And because we seldom talk about the subject at all, we're taking a positive focus as we consider dementia, sex, and well-being, the positive and life-affirming sexuality and sensuality of women and men living with a dementia. Today is the third of our series of webinars, and we're going to explore some of the challenges. What do we do when we can't have sex? What are some alternatives, including a more sensual living experience as an affirmation of our sexual selves without genital sex, and some examples of this. We will look at unwanted sex, consent and capacity, safeguarding and developing alternatives. How do we keep ourselves and others safe? And finally, we will look at a model to help us to have person-centered conversations about sex and sexuality. So here we go. You may recall that one of the questions I've asked previously was, why do humans have sex? Which gave us a long and still incomplete list of the many reasons, some of which might have been surprising. I asked the question so that we can develop a sense of why older adults might want to have sex. This helps us to appreciate the complexities of human connections and the similarities across the broad range of sexualities. What do consenting adults do when they can't have sex? That means how we learn to delay gratification until the situation, person, time, and place is appropriate to have sex. We have learned how to deflect, deny, postpone, and delay these feelings and desires over the course of our adult lifetimes. And the key word here is learn. We have learned how to do this. And what has been learned can be forgotten when living with memory changes, as we know. We will explore what that might mean for some people. And I invite you to think along with me about what we do when we can't have sex at the precise moment that we would like to. Here are some of the ideas from participants in previous training programs. What you might do when you can't have sex when you want to. Phone a friend, masturbate in private, do the housework, take a cold shower, go to the gym, take the dog for a walk, watch an adult movie, do the gardening and mow the lawn, eat, read a sexy novel, do drugs or smoke dope, bake or cook, get a massage, kickboxing, play computer games, play sports, cry, leave work early to meet your lover, take a nap, do the decorating. And these were uncensored responses to that question, so they may not be on the top of your list, but you get the idea how creative people can be. So when we reflect on this brief list, we can see that people can choose alternatives. And if we know that this is how some adults behave in order to postpone sex, then maybe there are more positive alternatives that we can offer to ourselves, our partners, patients, and residents in care homes. A cup of tea may not be the best solution for everyone. We learn to take our minds and bodies off sex and sometimes also find a way to release pent-up energy through physical activity and experience, resulting in a positive feeling of enjoyment. This will be different for each unique individual, but my guess is the sexually interested among us have all been there and are likely to go there again in the future, as long as we continue to be sexually active beings. Generally speaking, this list applies to men and women who identify also as LGBTQ+, and I am sure that there are more specific alternatives that I am unaware of. Colleagues and friends who proofread this book didn't have any to add or any specific comments to make at the time, but I'm always open to adding to the list in order to become more inclusive and to better highlight the needs and preferences of all sexualities. Sensuality as an alternative. Could it be that there is a place for sensual expression when sex isn't possible or desirable? Enjoying the whole array of our senses, what we hear and what we see, how we feel or touch, what we taste, and what aromas are around. Obviously, what people can introduce and engage in safely will depend on the unique circumstances of the people involved. But together we can become quite creative, and things that people thought were no longer possible, with a bit of forethought and planning, are possible for a bit longer. Living with COVID-19 for now, we will need to make adjustments to all that we are discussing in order to keep one another safe and to adhere to government guidance and regulations. These sensory experiences can include how foods and beverages are presented. Who doesn't enjoy a favorite meal or afternoon tea or morning coffee in lovely surroundings? Even a glass of sparkling water or juice in a beautiful crystal glass makes a difference to the experience. Or how about a shared shower or bubble bath, a side-by-side massage at home? Who might you talk to about helping you to make some changes in your routine and introduce ways to explore and enjoy various aspects of sensuality and romance? The key is to be willing to just have a go and not be too upset if it doesn't work out this time. Have a plan B and have a laugh. It is possible that it will work out just fine the next time you try it. And if not, you can give that one up and go on to the next possibility on your list. Incidentally, celebrating our own sensuality from the most simple to more detailed, is also something that can be enjoyed alone because our partner is unwell, uninterested, not here now, or we have never wanted one in the first place. For all of us, especially for many caregivers, these explorations and activities help to maintain your own identity. Your inner self will thank you for it. Many years ago, we tried out an experiment in a care home where I worked. This is unlikely in these pandemic days, but we can think ahead to the future. Once a month, we had a formal dinner in the dining room, complete with white linen tablecloths and napkins, silverware, LED candles, flowers, a pianist quietly playing in the corner, wine and non-alcoholic beverages as alternatives. A partner, relative or friend, or in their absence, a staff member, was invited to be the dining partner of the resident. The staff on duty sat at the tables, family style, and enjoyed a 3-course meal with the residents and their guests. Can you imagine what happened? How it was received? We involved residents, relatives, and staff in all of the preparations and decision-making about the evening. The first thing that we noticed was the sound of increased conversation. People were actually talking to one another, even those residents living with a dementia who were less able or willing to speak previously. Residents were talking to one another and not just to the staff or to their date. We heard and felt the buzz of anticipation and excitement, the soft music, the ambience of the room, and the glow on everyone's face from the low lighting and the candlelight, the scent of the flowers and the meal being prepared. Most residents ate more than they usually did. Many told us how much they had enjoyed it. Visitors had an equally good evening, and it created deeper levels of connection between residents, relatives, and staff, and their friends. How might this work for you at lunchtime, if not in the evening meal at the care home where you work? It's a possibility that's worth considering. The wonderful feeling of silk and satin against the skin, or the thrill of Egyptian cotton sheets, or the smell of old leather in a favorite sports car, the thud of a tool in your hand, the fur of your dog. Sensual experiences reach across gender and age. These are aspects of sensory life that many of us might imagine still being important and life-affirming, whether we are living with a dementia at home or not. What might your sensual preferences be? How do we bring more of our sensual selves into our lives and share that with others? Of course, the practicalities change over time, and we may make some of these sensualities impossible. So then we move on to the other senses. We have 5 to explore after all. What about the luxury of the perfect piece of chocolate cake, or strawberries warm and fresh from the garden? Watching the sunset together with a glass of wine stimulates memory and enhances shared intimacy. These are just a few suggestions, and I'm sure that you have your own. For people living together at home, these occasional treats can remind us of the little things that make a difference, that make our day better, our caring connections stronger. Unwanted sex, consent and capacity, safeguarding and developing alternatives. Not everyone living with a dementia will become sexually disinhibited or inappropriate or sexually overly demanding or abusive. Some people living with a dementia may not engage with their own or others' sexuality at all, and it may not be a part of their lives moving into the future. This can have a whole range of responses for those partners who have not voluntarily made the decision to give up on their sexual relationship. Some men and women find their sex lives continue apart from the person they care for, or are in partnership with, or are married to. This may present challenging situations for adult children, relatives, and friends. If we are professionals in support of the person living with a dementia, it is not for us to judge how their partner or spouse is living, and certainly not our role or responsibility to tell that person, other family members, or other professionals what we may know. Each person, irrespective of diagnosis or age, has the right to privacy and self-expression under the Human Rights Act. They also have the right to be free from abuse, harassment, and coercion, and that's where your safeguarding policies come into place. Often, sexual encounters and concerns that people have about a partner or a relative is that they have forgotten that sexual and sensual behaviors, words, and conversations may now be out of bounds. Most often, the person living with a dementia is not aware of what they might be saying or doing. What used to be private is now in the public domain. How might that feel if it was us? And how would we want those around us to respond? Those are tricky questions, but they help us get to the heart of the matter. Having a discussion using logic to try and alter the behavior is not always helpful and might lead to further disagreement, frustration, or angry outburst. Because of the emotional and personal nature of sex, It may be that the atmosphere around the topic is highly charged. In some situations, certainly not all, a person living with a dementia may become more sexually explicit in conversation and behavior, and may become more demanding. In rare instances, this may result in sexual abuse or harassment of a partner or a staff member. When living with a dementia, some of the touch received during care can be a miscue for sexual responses. Using terms of endearment, hugging and kissing, being playful can add to the confusion of this situation for some people. Keeping ourselves and others safe. Excuse me. In webinar number 2, I said that what we also need to be sensitive to is that sensory and sensual triggers could be misunderstood by a person living with dementia and create responses that are unhelpful. The close proximity of the body of another person and their kind, intimate touch could trigger feelings and behaviors of a sexual nature when none was intended. Playful, flirting behavior of a non-sexual variety may unintentionally do the same. If misinterpretation is a possibility, then we must be clear about our role and purpose and keep touch kind but unsensual, using matter-of-fact language, neutral facial expressions and body language to help convey our message of non-sexuality. Reintroducing our own role in the moment and in the task, and redirecting the person to that again, if necessary, more than once. It may be helpful to leave the room for a few moments if it is safe to do so, or if at work, call a colleague to replace you for a little while to change the energy and the focus. The individual who is able and feels safe in your care may use this opportunity of intimacy to share some of their thoughts or memories about their sexual life, their sexual self, and what they might be missing. All that might be required is a caring, non-judgmental listener, you. Where there is the possibility for coercion and abuse, we must all be vigilant and trained in how to respond in person-centered ways rather than to react or overreact. If you're in a partnership, or you are the adult child or grandchild or relative who is living at home with a person who has a dementia, you may experience a situation that is potentially or actually sexually abusive, harassing, violent, or upsetting. You never knew or experienced this person in this capacity before, and it is distressing. It is essential that you find safety for yourself in the immediate moment and in the long term, and find someone to talk about this new or ongoing behavior. What we see, hear, or encounter may be new or even shocking, but training helps us to realize that human sexual behavior is natural. It is the situation, the person, or the context and the environment that become inappropriate, not the person or the act in itself. Perhaps the challenges living with dementia have made that previous sexual violence or abuse may now be more frequent or distressing and extreme. Even within your own home, 2 adults must consent to sex and have the mental capacity to do so. It is important that we recognize that we are not likely to change a person's behavior, especially if they're living with dementia and unable to regulate their feelings and behaviors as a result of brain changes. But there are things that we can do to change our responses to the behaviors and find alternatives. Not all of those alternatives will work all the time. So plan B, C, D, and maybe all the way to Z might be essential. For the most part, the individual would most likely be upset and or embarrassed if they were in full control of their thoughts, feelings, and behavior. And if we can hold on to that idea, it will encourage us to respond in kind, caring, person-centered ways. When a person is attending day services or is living in a residential community, it may be easier to notice these changes, and there are more likely to be people around that you can talk to at the time. And certainly talking about the situation you find yourself in can be really helpful. And the social work staff, the team at Dementia South Africa, might be a place for you to start to have those conversations. And we can talk about this a little bit at the end. Maybe it's your local GP, your mental health team, maybe a trusted friend or a faith leader. But talking about it is going to be the first step important. We also need to make sure that professionals are trained how to observe safeguarding and abuse and what the law says about sexual exploitation and assault. What do your laws say about the mental capacity of the person living with dementia and about their ability to consent to sexual acts? What are the procedures to ensure safety for all concerned? In this work and in these relationships, we are always walking that fine line between empowering self-expression, human rights, independence, and ensuring that vulnerable people are not put at risk. The law is clear that adults must have the mental capacity and the ability to consent to sex with another person. How do we have person-centered conversations that can help us to respond most appropriately to issues of a sexual, sensual, intimate, and relational nature? As we've already established, it is rarely easy to talk about sex, especially to our elders and even to our sexual partners. But I encourage us to bring our thinking and practice into the 21st century. We cannot claim to be working in holistic, person-centered ways if we leave these important conversations unspoken. Not everyone will have these conversations in their career, but we must have them with ourselves, within our staff teams, so that we have a better understanding and appreciation of the whole person in our care. Yes, this is a private and sensitive area of a person's life, but so are finances, bowel movements, religion, end-of-life care, and funeral plans, and yet we manage to have these conversations. Training in sexuality and intimacy and relationships is also essential to maintain safe and effective practice and to support and equip partners and family caregivers. Having open conversations as partners, family, staff members, and advocates for adults living with a dementia is essential so that we can avoid the possibility of what is natural human behavior being misinterpreted, made foolish, wrong, or dirty, and even criminalized. Person-centered conversations begin with the work of Carl Rogers, who created the person-centered approach in counseling relationships. These have been adopted by organizations worldwide as a means of creating helpful relationships. And we ourselves can be helpful in this process if we are ACE, A-C-E. A, accepting and not judgmental or shocked in our responding. C, congruent, being authentic, genuine, and consistent, being who we say we are and turning up when we say we will, and having a reliable, consistent attitude and approach. E, empathic, showing a genuine concern and wanting to see things from the other person's viewpoint, putting ourselves in their shoes and having a preparation for these conversations. Tom Kitwood revolutionized caring for individuals living with a dementia when in 1997 he introduced us to a person-centered approach to caring for people with dementia based on Carl Rogers, who we've just introduced. He gave us a visual image of a flower with each petal representing a psychological need of a person living with a dementia. And actually, when I look at them, they're all what I need in my life too. We can use this image of the flower as a template around which to build our conversations, and also to inform us how to write our care plans to include sexuality, sensuality, and intimacy across sexualities. Here we have an objective way to address these aspects of daily living, steering clear of our opinions and views, and truly advocating for the adult that we support. There are lots of images of Tom Kitwood's flower online, but in the absence of that, I've got a handwritten one here, and I hope that you can see each petal has one of these areas for us to look at. So we have comfort. How can I help this person feel comfortable now? How comfortable can I be in sharing with that other person? Inclusion. How do we have this conversation together? How can I include this person in what we talk about? How, where, and with whom do they want to have this conversation, if at all? Identity. Who is this person? How do they describe themselves, especially in terms of their sexuality? Attachment. Who are they attached to? Who are their partners, spouses, children, pets, friends, colleagues, and lovers? Where do they find meaningful connection? Occupation. What is meaningful to them in their lives regarding their sexuality and sensuality? How do they want to continue, if they do, to experience and express their sexual and sensual selves? At the center of the flower is the word love, for which I'm guessing that there are as many interpretations as there are people. We know that people can experience sex with and without love, and it isn't helpful to assume that love is always present. There may be many ways of feeling positive towards a person, but the individual may not describe that as love. We wait to hear from them how they speak about it, and we are guided by their experiencing of it. These areas of life-affirming importance to us as humans can be brought into the realm of person-centered approaches and ways of considering how living with a dementia affects sexual identity and expression, and how this contributes or detracts from well-being. So here we are at the end of our third and final webinar. Phew, there's an awful lot to take in a short space of time. I hope that it's been interesting and in some ways helpful. And a huge thanks to Karen and Abigail and Dementia South Africa for inviting me and for hosting these webinars. And in a couple of minutes, we're going to switch off the recording so that you can all join in, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to have some conversation. But what I'd like to do is, with your permission, Abigail, is just to finish with a poem that I wrote back in June of 2020. And the poem was really stimulated as a response to relatives and visitors and loved ones coming back into our care homes in England. But I think it may apply even if you haven't been in a very formal lockdown. So it's called Homecoming. Let me come alongside you now with gentleness and humility, unhurried and quiet after so long. Not knowing or understanding the kind of world you've created for yourself while I've been away. Did you notice that I've been away? Maybe in time I can win your trust, your friendship, and maybe even your heart. But if that is absent, I will still come, keeping us alive, even though our dance was interrupted. How fortunate am I that these women and men who came night and day when I could not, stood in the gap where I used to be. Gratitude is too small a word. But now I can come back, and together we can learn new dance steps to a tune of our own making. Shy at first, we eye each other from the chairs along the wall. Then one day, a while from now, I tentatively hold out my hand, palm upturned. Would you like to dance? I ask, smiling into your eyes. You place your hand in mine and sparkle back. I thought you'd never ask. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Danuta. That was beautiful. And thank you again from myself and from Karen and the whole Dementia SA team, and for everyone who joins us for the webinars as well as views the webinars later in their own time on YouTube.